San Diego, right, Jared?
That's right. Yeah, hanging out over here for the summer, which not a bad place to hang out in the summer. I guess any time of year, San Diego. That's for sure.
It's like 30 degrees cooler or something like that,
right? Yes, that's true.
I have we went to a vacation in San Diego a couple of weeks ago, and two of my dorm mates, who I have not seen for 21 years, are now based in San Diego. And you would communicate via Facebook and text and what have you, but we haven't seen each other for so long. And they're like, and so we spent one dinner together, and it's so good to see them. And then who knew we'd all end up in the United States, and them in San Diego and me in Phoenix. So it was a really good reunion.
That's fun. And yeah, it's a short little drive, right? Not too far of a commute back and forth between Phoenix and San Diego.
Good morning, folks. Thank you for joining us this morning. If you're just joining us, we're going to wait, give others maybe just 2 more minutes to join us as well, and then we're going to start today's discussion. Again, if you're just joining us, we're going to wait maybe just 1 more minute to give others to join us as well, and then we're going to start. I think it's 8:01. I think we are going to start. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Arizona Capital Times Morning Scoop on Housing. My name is Luigi Del Puerto. I'm the publisher and editor of the Arizona Capital Times. And of course, the Arizona Capital Times covers state government and state public policy. And if you don't have a Capital Times subscription, please let me know. I'll get you squared away. We have a great subject this morning and a great panel this morning. As you know, Phoenix is among the top destinations in the country for in-migration. Shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. Many of us moved to Phoenix. But Phoenix is also setting a record in price appreciation. It is the markets with the largest rental price increase in the last 12 months, which is also true for house sales. And that brings us to the housing challenges we face today, primarily the potential of thousands of families getting kicked out of their homes or their apartments, following a moratorium on evictions, which has been extended, but that's not going to last forever. But first, I want to thank our sponsors this morning. I want to thank the Arizona Housing Coalition for sponsoring this discussion. The Arizona Housing Coalition is the largest housing stability advocacy organization in the state, with more than 200 member organizations, national partners, and dedicated volunteers, all working together to provide Arizonans with a safe, affordable place to call home. The mission is to be a collaborative association leading in efforts to end homelessness and advocate for safe and, as I mentioned, affordable homes for all Arizonans. The coalition is also the proud home of the Arizona Veterans Stand Down Alliance, which is a statewide effort to connect homeless and at-risk veterans with the services they need. I also want to thank Zillow for sponsoring today's discussion. Zillow, as you know, is the most visited real estate website in the United States. Zillow and its affiliates offer customers information as well as on-demand experience for selling, buying, renting, financing, or moving. It is the largest brand within Zillow is the largest brand within the Zillow group. Though that portfolio also brings, many other brands, affiliates, and subsidiaries, including the Zillow Premier Agent, Trulia, HotPads, Street Easy, and Dot Loop, just to name a few. Today, the Zillow Group employs nearly 6,500 full-time employees across all 50 states, with about 250 of them located in our state. Zillow also holds a major corporate footprint in Arizona with an innovation hub and an office located in Scottsdale. Again, I want to thank Zillow and the Arizona Housing Coalition for sponsoring today's morning scoop. We have a great panel this morning. Joining is Jared Davis, who is Zillow's Senior Government Relations and Public Affairs Manager, where he oversees relationships with government, community, and public sector stakeholders in 4 Western states, including Arizona. Prior to joining Zillow, he helped lead public affairs for Uber across Southern California. Jared has a long history of representing emerging technologies before regulators, policymakers, and community partners, in addition, of course, to leveraging the unique resources of technology companies for greater public policy objectives. Jared is a graduate of the George Washington University, and he currently resides in Arizona. Jared, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much, Luigi. It's great to be here, everyone. Good morning.
And also joining us this morning is John Service, who is the Executive Director of the Arizona Housing Coalition, a merger of the Arizona Coalition to End Homelessness and Arizona Housing Alliance. Joan has over 20 years of experience in program coordination with a focus on educating the community about issues of social needs through state and federal legislative advocacy, community organizing, coalition building, and of course, public relations. Joan holds a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's degree in public administration, both from Arizona State University. Joan, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. And thank you to my fellow panelists.
Also joining us is Representative Ben Toma, who represents LD22 and also serves as Majority Leader of the House of Representatives. Representative Toma was born in Romania, came to America in pursuit of the American dream in 1987. He has lived in the West Valley since 1996. He is the co-founder and CEO of Century 21 Toma Partners, one of the fastest growing Century 21 franchises in the country, and one that has been consistently named as one of Arizona's top 25 real estate brokerages. He previously managed billion-dollar budgets and prepared financial forecasts for top executives at American Express. He's also involved in his local church, where he serves as music director. He also serves on the board of directors of Binita International, a nonprofit organization established to help orphans and the needy in Romania. Representative Toma, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Thank you to the panel as well.
And finally joining us is Tom Simplot, who is the director of the Arizona Department of Housing. Most recently, he served as senior deputy chairman of the National Endowment for the Arts in Washington, D.C. He was also a longtime member of the Phoenix City Council and served as president and CEO of the Arizona Multi-Housing Association, which is a statewide trade association for the apartment industry in Arizona. While on the Phoenix City Council, he focused on housing, arts, and economic development and led the efforts to establish the first new build, permanent, supportive housing apartment community in the city of Phoenix. Tom, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Luigi.
As I mentioned, we have a great subject this morning. There's a lot to talk about, but let me consider a few facts. Eviction filings are down 55% between March 2020 and February 2021, largely as a result of the eviction moratorium that's been imposed in Arizona as well as in the rest of the country. But 90%, immediate evictions are up 90%, and there are about 500 cases filed in the same time period for immediate evictions. During this pandemic, between March 2020 and February 2021, we saw nearly 30,000 evictions filed. And of course, nearly 3,000 Maricopa tenants faced more than one eviction filed during the pandemic as well. And I think I've seen all kinds of estimates, but the latest one I saw, or at least one of the report I saw, puts the number of nationwide evictions filed at nearly 500,000. I want to go to Jared. Jared, can you set the tone for us? What is happening nationwide? And can you tell us about, what is when you're looking at nationwide, where does Arizona place in that context?
Yeah, of course, Luigi, and good morning again, everyone. Appreciate the time. I think it's important before we dive in and really discuss some of the complexities around the evictions and the data we're seeing there to kind of table set a bit and understand what's happening in the broader housing market, broader rental market, not just in the United States, but specifically in Arizona. And truly what we're seeing right now is pretty, to use an overused term, unprecedented. And really, I think there's two major factors that are contributing to the kind of red hot nature of Arizona and specifically Phoenix's housing and rental markets. And one of them is really built around this concept that our CEO has coined the Great Reshuffling, which essentially is this unleashing of social, demographic, and financial or economic factors that are allowing folks who work in corporate America or internet-based jobs to really pick up and move entire locations, right? And this freedom to work from home or to live and work where you want and perhaps seek new surroundings, more affordable, more space, et cetera, has really unleashed a huge amount of pressure on the housing market and on the rental market. If you look specifically at migration patterns using 2019 census data, some of our data, as well as a research piece we did with North America moving van lines, you'll see that Phoenix is the largest recipient of inbound migration. It is the largest metropolitan in the United States that served as the #1 destination for folks moving in 2020. And that's a trend we already knew existed in Arizona before the pandemic, right? Folks wanting to move to the Grand Canyon State, wanting the quality of life, wanting just another place to live and call home. And really the pandemic just accelerated that trend even more so. So you're seeing folks move into Arizona at an even faster clip than they were moving before the pandemic, and really starting to put an intense amount of pressure on inventory and driving up pricing. That's one major factor. Another factor that our economists and folks inside Zillow are really trying to measure and understand is really the maturity and the home buying age of the millennial generation, which is now stepping into their mid to late 30s and are at that age in life where they are really looking to settle down and buy a home. And to put things a little bit into perspective and for numbers, the millennial generation is the largest ever in American history, in recorded history, even larger than the baby boom generation. So you're dealing with now two very large social demographic movements that are unleashing where folks can live and work, and a whole cohort of Americans, millions of folks at this point, that are entering the prime age to buy. So those factors are really compounding to put a lot of pressure again on home buyers, on sellers, on really just the overall market. And when I mention the migration patterns of folks moving into Arizona, again, this is nothing new. This is something that we know that demographers have been tracking in the state for probably decades at this point. But the clip at which they are coming and the places they are coming from is really changing a lot around the market. And to give you some quick insight on our report with North America Moving Van Lines, we were actually able to drill down and find the top 5 metros that were actually shedding residents to Phoenix, and found that in order, they're Chicago, Los Angeles, Seattle, Denver, and San Diego. So these are the top 5 metros that have been shedding residents, that have been picking up and moving to Arizona, and specifically to the Phoenix metro area. So I think when you factor all of those kind of social and demographic trends into one, and then you begin to understand why Phoenix in particular is the market with the largest amount of rent appreciation over the last 12 months, which on average, the rents in the United States are 9% higher than they were in July of 2020. In the Phoenix metro area, they are 23% higher than they were in July of 2020. That is a record. That is a record since we've been measuring, and is a record for all of the metros in the United States right now. And since we mentioned for sale market and the housing market, the price appreciation or home value appreciation for Phoenix has risen almost 30%, 29.8% since July of 2020. And that is the market with the second highest value after Austin, Texas. So Phoenix is really coming in at #1 on rental price appreciation and a #2 on home value appreciation over the last 12 months, which we think really underscores, again, some of the migration patterns and the data that we are seeing of folks flocking to Arizona. And what is that doing to the housing and rental market? And we think that's playing out right now in some of this intense pressure that we're seeing that truly we have not seen before, Luigi.
Thank you for that context, Jared. So talking about the housing pressures as context, the fact that a lot of people are moving to Arizona, rental prices are, skyrocketing. Tom, give us an overview of what's happening from your end in terms of the housing situation, more specifically when it comes to families and renters who are right now inoculated from evictions. I think that's been more than a year now. But this eviction moratorium, which has been extended to October 3 for areas with high COVID-19 surge, that's not going to last forever. So what's the landscape here?
Well, to start with, we have a supply and demand issue, and we have not kept up with, as Jared has indicated, the influx of new residents. Nobody could have seen this coming to the extent that it has. Let's just own that. But at the end of the day, we're still left with this supply and demand issue. By some studies, I don't know if it's one of Zillow's, but by some studies, according to some studies, we need 150,000 new units throughout Arizona. And we're nowhere near building enough to accomplish that in the short term. So from our standpoint at the Department of Housing, we are the conduit of funding, or at least some funding opportunities for affordable housing development. And our goal is to free up that pipeline so that we can move those funding, whether they're low-income housing tax credits or other opportunities, move that funding through to the development community to build more units. But I'm going to add one other thing. Even with all of the money coming into the state of Arizona from the federal government, hundreds of millions of dollars, right? If our local elected officials don't agree to provide the zoning approval and the building permit and project approval, not one unit can be built. And that's an important distinction and something to keep in mind as we're battling this supply and demand issue. Until we figure that out, prices are going to continue to go up.
You mentioned there are 150,000 units that your estimate is what we need in Arizona to be built. Aside from getting those permits, and it looks to me like, correct me if I'm wrong, there's some bureaucratic delay in getting those permits or getting those entangled. What else is causing the delay in building these units?
At the end of the day, if you're building market rate, no matter whether you're building market rate or whether you're building affordable or workforce housing, you have the same challenges, and that is financing. For market rate and right now for affordable, the money is available, quite frankly. So the next issue then is land costs and land availability. Land costs are going through the roof. Now, the market rate folks, they can probably adjust their prices, right, to be able to accommodate that. When you're talking about affordable apartments, and especially the extremely low income apartment communities, that luxury doesn't exist. So if they're able to lock up land, they then have to, in a short amount of time, short as possible, get that zoning or land use approval from the local elected officials in order to make that a reality. Again, the funding right now, we're in a unique period of time. Funding generally is available to do this. Skyrocket land prices and materials and labor costs to build have increased 20 to 40%. And even worse, when you're looking at the rural areas of Arizona, it's not as bad in the metro areas. But when you go out and try to build 100 units in Yavapai County and you can't find the labor force to even show up, now you're extending the time, you're extending the cost, and who hurts at the end of who is hurt at the end of the day? It's the families who need affordable housing.
Joan, I want to go to you. What are you seeing on the ground? What are you hearing from members of your coalition?
So I think, obviously I just want to start by saying the pandemic has really shown the importance of and the value of home. And so it's great. It's finally our time to really elevate the issue of home. Unfortunately, far too many Arizonans can't shelter in place because they don't have that safe, affordable place to call home. What we are seeing on the ground level, a lot of our members, I will say this about our membership and about those in the ending homelessness and affordable housing sector. We are a nimble and responsive community. I think we're far best to respond to this pandemic and its challenges. However, we have, we actually, as Director Simplot mentioned, we have a once in a generation funding opportunity, but we have some labor challenges, and we're all frankly a little exhausted by this pandemic. It has worn out on our sector. However, we're going to continue to be nimble and resourceful and really leverage the funds that we have available to us, and really ensure that folks have that safe, affordable place to call home. However, things don't change overnight. We have, as Director Simplot mentioned, tons of funds coming into our state to address affordable housing and ending homelessness. Things don't shift overnight. I think a lot of, when we talk about the kind of saving grace around evictions has been rental aid, and getting those dollars out the door has been a challenge. There's a lot of issues.
When you say has been a challenge, I mean, they're not getting to the people as quickly as we would like the money to get to the people.
Exactly that. According to early estimates in Arizona, we have about $883 million for rental assistance. Only about $72 million has hit the streets, gone down to families in need. So that's about 8% of those funds out the door. So, and here's the challenge. We have, again, rental administrators have, just broad shoulders bearing the weight of getting those dollars out the door. But there is some bureaucracy, especially, bureaucracy exists when you're trying to get dollars out the door. We at the Arizona Housing Coalition are working with lawmakers at the federal, state, and local level to suggest some administrative changes and some fixes. But it's not going to happen overnight.
And Representative Toma, what are you seeing from the point of view of the state? I mean, you're immensely or intimately involved in housing issues. You're hearing that, of course, we have these pressure points just because historically a lot of people are moving to Arizona. There's a lot of them, even more so in the last year during the pandemic. You've heard Joan mention it's 8% of available housing assistance. Only 8% is getting to the folks that need them. Your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, thanks, Luigi. I couldn't agree more, actually, on most of what's been said. You look at the situation. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody here. As a matter of fact, I think it was about a year ago on this very forum that I opposed the idea of a moratorium. And the reason is, and remains the same, I think it's making things worse. I think it's making things worse for families, and it's making things worse for people that need affordable housing as well. What happens is, as was mentioned, it's a supply and demand problem, first and foremost. We have a ton of demand for all the reasons. I don't get why people from San Diego are moving here, but outside of that, we have a ton of demand and not enough supply. Part of this is, of course, history. We got hit pretty bad during 08, 09. And so to some extent, maybe there's a little bit of PTSD, if you will, for many of our builders and developers here in Arizona. And so we haven't built at the same rate as population has grown. That's the first thing. But as I say to my agents, every month I run the meeting. My wife runs the company, thankfully, because I'm down there often. But I run the data part of the meeting, and I say it every month to them. You have to live somewhere. You're either going to live with mom and dad, or you're going to pay whatever the rent is, whatever the market, whatever you can find, or you're going to buy something. Or unfortunately for some, you don't have any of those options. And that's some of the things we're talking about here. But my point is, you have to live somewhere. This isn't a want, this is a need. And so because of that, the prices are going to continue to go up. The moratorium, instead of fixing the issue, because Congress created an inefficient and ineffective system that just isn't streamlined. It doesn't get the funds out the way that they would have hoped. To be gracious, it doesn't do that. And so as you heard, we spent what 10% of the money we've gotten, which is ridiculous. And yet you have owners selling, especially mom and pops that only own 1 or 2 properties, something very small, which by the way is the majority of our rental properties in Arizona still. We don't have, unlike other cities and unlike other states, we don't have lots of large developments. We have some and they're growing, and we're going to need a lot more, as you've heard Director Simplot say. But we don't have that in Arizona. We depend and historically have depended on single family residences that are owned by mom and pops that maybe they are snowbirds, maybe they decided to lease it out. And for all those reasons, they're deciding to sell. The moment they get a chance, they decide to sell because they don't want to deal with this. And that is making the problem worse. So in terms of what to do, I mean, we can debate and wax poetic about the whole thing, but bottom line is, in large part, Congress has to step up and fix it, fix the issue and loosen things up. And I actually couldn't agree more with Director Simplot in terms of the cities. On the one hand, everybody can complain about it, but on the other, it's if there was a will, and the will needs to be whatever program is coming forward, you know what, expedite it. And I don't mean in theory, I mean in practice. Actually get, with the developer, and don't leave the room until you figure out a way, a path forward to get the programs approved, to get the projects going, to get land freed up, to free up from, I don't know, zoning or whatever requirements there might be. Get it going, get it done. And I think if there was a will, there definitely must be a way.
You mentioned why people from San Diego are moving to Arizona. It must be the weather, right? Has to be the weather. One of the things that we're hearing from everybody is that, as Joan noted, only a small part of the money that's available for housing assistance is getting to the people. And obviously in a crisis situation, we want the money to get to as many people as quickly as possible, because that's the way you solve this problem that we're facing, or at least one of them that we're facing right now. Director Simplot, what is causing the delay exactly, sir?
Well, there's not probably just one reason. I'll tell you that every other week, the Arizona's court system convenes the stakeholders involved in trying to get this money out the door. So in addition to DES, which is handling our rental assistance funds for the areas outside of the urban areas, okay? So to put it into perspective, the state of Arizona received 60% of the funds for 20% of the population in Arizona. DES actually is doing a good job of getting this money out the door, but again, it's not just one issue or one reason. So for example, let's start with what Representative Toma has said. They built and designed a system that number one is not probably considered consumer friendly. They're asking for a lot of documentation from the renter, from the family, from the tenant. So if that tenant actually submits their application, then they have to complete the application. So just submitting the application and starting the process isn't going to give them any funding. And by the way, the funding goes directly to the landlord, which may be one of the other challenges. It doesn't go to the tenant, it goes directly to the landlord. So I think it's also important to look at the incentive factor, that have we given the tenant community, the resident community, enough incentive to complete that process when they're living through a rental eviction moratorium? So it boils down to personal responsibility. In a lot of ways, it boils down to the fact that they designed a very flawed system. And keep in mind that landlords are allowed to submit applications for their tenants, but without the private information that only the tenant can provide, the landlord can't complete that process. So again, you've got basically the private sector landlords who are holding the bag for those who desperately need this funding. So nobody's winning out of this. The tenants aren't winning, the landlords aren't winning. It is a flawed system. And I think Representative Toma, you mentioned the letter that went to members of Congress. It does need to be addressed. And by the way, this also isn't just an Arizona problem. This is throughout the entire country. By some estimates, even the state of New York, Chuck Schumer, even the state of New York has only from 5 to 10% of their funds out the door. So at some point, it's going to catch the attention of Congress. It has to. Too many people are suffering throughout this current system.
In fact, Jared, I want to ask you, Director Simplot mentioned that this is happening not just to Arizona, this is happening across the country. What are you hearing from the networks that you have in terms of just getting the rental assistance to people?
Yeah, I was about to chime in and actually add on to what Director Simplot had said there. And I think a point that he made early in the call is an important one, right? No one could foresee the pandemic or foresee the housing challenges that would stem from it, right? So the amount of state governments and federal government work that has had to go in to create sort of the digital infrastructure to support these payments and facilitate the applications, et cetera. I mean, these are things that, again, the governments had to do sort of on the fly and rather quickly create. So there are some, I think, growing pains in that. But I mean, as the director mentioned, this is a problem, unfortunately, that is not unique to Arizona. We work with a lot of governments across the country. We're based in Seattle, have worked with the state of Washington. I'm based currently in California and trying to help COVID relief assistance in that state. And Director Simplot mentioned New York. I mean, this is something from red to blue state from across the country. We're really seeing a challenge, and most of it is administrative and working through some of the bureaucratic machinery, if you will, to try and make a more seamless process to get those dollars into folks' hands faster. And it's an unfortunate reality, but it's very much not unique to the state of Arizona in this case.
Joan, walk us through just very briefly, walk us through the application process and where do you see the bottleneck there?
Well, I think the first thing to realize is that when you talk about the E word, evictions, it's a crisis. It's a family crisis. Someone is having, maybe a job loss that has led to the eviction. And so they have a crisis mentality. And so for them to then figure out where is their last paycheck stub, and maybe their last employer is an adversarial relationship that led to the departure. They have to find their lease agreement and figure out their protections. They have to, get their bank statements and then upload it. Again, depending on the jurisdiction that is overseeing the rental assistance, they might have different paperwork processes. And then, as Director Simplot and Jared and Representative Toma mentioned, this whole response system was not only put up fast, but also at the same time, a lot of our rental administrators are moving away from an in-office setting to working remotely. So the authorization process then requires, getting in touch with somebody and hey, maybe some of those rental administrators have COVID. And so there has, just this whole infrastructure has created a backlog. It's bottlenecked. Director Simplot talked about the Department of Economic Security's administration of rental assistance. They've done a fairly good job. Other jurisdictions have done a fairly good job. Again, it just takes time. It doesn't happen overnight.
What I'm hearing is that the system is built for processing things based on paper, and the process is tedious, but it kind of worked. Or maybe I shouldn't say it kind of worked before, but it was kind of, it was maybe workable when there's not a ton of people that need assistance immediately. So we are now in a setting in which people are working remotely, which means you need Wi-Fi, you need a computer, you need maybe a scanner, maybe you need access to Adobe so that you can e-sign your documents and get it all. And this is all creating all sorts of, troubles and a bottleneck amidst the fact that you're living in a pandemic in which people are losing jobs. Our economy is open now. They can't find jobs. What do you call this one? But you're going through this period when somebody might be sick. You may be going through death in the family, and all of its compounding is coming to a head. And now we're seeing what we're seeing. Is that Representative Toma? Is that an accurate, description of potentially what's going on?
Sure. I mean, there's no doubt, I think, as everybody sort of touched on in some small measure, or larger measure, that sort of it's a perfect storm in that sense, and that there are lots of different contributing factors that have caused the issue. And it's very true that it can be very chaotic, especially if a family member is very sick, or if you've gotten laid off, or and often those things happen together. There's definitely sympathy and understanding from a policy standpoint. At least I can speak for myself and my colleagues when it comes to that. But at the same time, I think the problem is just doing something isn't always the right answer. Sometimes you have to sit back and think for half a second, is the something that we're proposing going to be effective and actually move the ball forward and solve the issue, or at least make it better instead of doing harm? And you look at moratorium in particular, since we're on that topic, we don't demand that Fry's give everybody free groceries, for example, because it's COVID. Right? Or Amazon ships stuff for free to everybody because it's COVID. But yet that's what we demanded of rental owners and of small property owners in particular. And then we said, well, it's all good, but fill out this process, which we talked about all the ways where that may not work and it doesn't work in practice, but do that and then you'll get reimbursed. Well, again, often as a landlord, you don't have the opportunity to do that because you don't have the information. You don't know exactly what's going on with the tenant, and yet you're supposedly going to attest to those things if you're going to fill out that paperwork. And so there's all kinds of issues. Plus, on top of all this, going back to construction, since we were talking about that for a second, as Jared said, it is unprecedented. I'm having the personal joy of trying to build a home right now. And yesterday, I spent all day trying to find windows and doors. And aluminum windows, which are the less expensive of the window options, the quote is March or April. So if I order them today, I'll get the windows in March or April. So it's not even a price thing, although that's definitely part of it. It's just, that's the reality that we're in. And so, all the more reason that those of us that are in policymaking positions or ability to influence policy need to really sit back and think about what this is actually going to do in the long term. Are we going to solve the problem, or are we going to just make it worse when we put in something that's kind of half-baked and sort of a knee-jerk reaction?
Can I interject?
Go ahead, Joan.
So one of the things that when we talk about the administration of rental aid, one of the things that the Housing Coalition has been advocating for is that anybody that touches the help system, anybody that receives access, TANF, unemployment insurance, their records are already stored in one of our state agencies. I feel like there's an opportunity to, if they touch the help system in some way, it almost should be a universal application in getting that rental aid out. But I also want to talk about, when I mentioned universal application, harkens me back to thinking about universal vouchers, which is something that Congress has, some of our current administration and Congress has long debated. I do want to take that opportunity to say that, when we talk about universal housing vouchers, and something that Arizona has recently had about 1,000 emergency housing choice vouchers come into our state. What's happening, though, is that there's not enough units. Like we talked about the supply and demand issue. There are not enough units for folks to lease up at. And I do want to give a special shout out to Director Simplot, Representative Toma, who are working on policy and have developed policy and passed policy this last legislative session to help with that unit supply in creating a state affordable housing tax credit, which, it's not the end all be all, but it creates an additional capital to create more units, because that is such a need in our community.
I'm hearing all of you, and I have an overwhelming sense of pessimism, and which I don't want to feel that way, but that's how I feel just hearing all kinds of problems coming to a head right now. But Director Simplot, I know just before we started our morning scoop this morning, you talked about one of the things you're doing in the Department of Housing to kind of streamline things. If you can just briefly describe what it is.
Sure. It gets a little in the weeds, but low-income housing tax credits, Joan just mentioned, we now have state low-income housing tax credits. And however, we have had federal low-income housing tax credits available since 1986 throughout the entire country. Every state has allocated so many tax credits to issue, in particular for building affordable housing. So here in Arizona, we are sadly considered one of the very worst states when it gets through the process, for what's called 4% low-income housing tax credits. Now, in addition to that, we also have 9% low-income housing tax credits, which are typically what are used for extremely low-income apartment communities, permanent supportive housing, that sort of thing. The goal has to be to reduce that regulatory burden to the point where we are allowing the pipeline to open back up again. We have to be prepared for these developers as they walk through the door. And I'm talking for-profit developers and not for-profit developers, to be able to utilize these low-income housing tax credits and initiate the construction of their new communities. And we're committed to that. So we're just now finishing our QAP process. Every state has to do this process in order to allocate the low-income housing tax credits. Again, ours has been one of the most convoluted and more difficult processes throughout the country. We are essentially starting over in that process, and we're going to streamline that with input from stakeholders throughout the state, whether you're a builder, a lender, a financier, a tax credit purchaser. We want to know and have been asking, what does it take to open up this market to bring especially outside capital into the state, build more affordable housing as quickly as we can, meeting safety, health, and all of the other obligations that, of course, we have to meet. So I'm actually very hopeful, Luigi, that given this unique time that we're all living in, we actually have an opportunity here to really move forward and build a lot of units here in the next 24 months to 36 months.
Well, thank you for that very optimistic note. Go ahead, Jared.
Real fast, Luigi, and echo some of the optimism that Director Simplot had shared. And I think it's important too, representing the private sector here, to just share a little bit of some of the innovation and work we're trying to do in this space, knowing that it's going to take truly all sectors to come forward and think of new ideas and solutions for permanent housing. And Joan had mentioned the universal application, and Zillow, this is something we've really devoted a lot of resources to recently, and really trying to find ways that we can leverage technology and actually create a universal rental application, which we're very happy has gone live to market. And it works exactly as you would think. Essentially, a tenant or a household can fill out an application and use it multiple times and apply to multiple different listings across Zillow's site. So they're able to take that one application, pay a one-time fee, fill it out once, and have it applied to as many properties that you see listed on Zillow's website for a 30-day period. It sounds like a great seamless customer experience, but there's actually a really large equity component there when you examine the amount of times that individual races or demographic groups have to apply to a rental unit before securing them. On average, white renters apply approximately 2 times before they secure that unit. Black renters is around 4 times, and Latinx communities is around 7 times. So when you factor in that individual payment per application on an average time per demographic group, that's a lot of money you're actually forcing folks to pay just to apply to get into that unit. So this is something that Zillow is thinking about from the private sector's perspective and trying to bring innovation and resources there to really be a good partner to work with the public sector alongside Director Simplot and representatives like Representative Toma and stakeholders like Joan in their work. So wanted to bring that forward because I do think there's a role the private sector can play here, and we're happy and excited to be doing that in Arizona and across the United States.
So there's one application process you fill out and you can send it to multiple places, which is something, quite frankly, that's happening elsewhere in other industries. You know, if you're trying to look for somebody to fix your bathroom or something like that, and you filled out a form and it gets sent to multiple contractors, and obviously if you can find one these days, then but it does give you the opportunity to use technology to kind of streamline things and make things more efficient. I want to go to, so the moratorium on eviction has been extended to October 3rd for areas, as I mentioned, experiencing a surge in COVID-19 cases for the last 14 days. And if I'm not mistaken, this applies to all of the counties in Arizona. Is that correct, Director Simplot?
Yes, yes, it is. You can see Joan going, yes. Yes, it absolutely does. Now, having said that, this gives folks some more time to finish their paperwork, to work with their landlords. I can't emphasize enough how important it is for tenants to communicate with their landlords and vice versa. If they're not communicating, if they're not being transparent, then quite frankly, they're both going to lose. And so I just want to reinforce that every chance I can.
If your eviction was completed between August 1, August 3rd, that's the window in which the previous moratorium expired and then the new one was implemented. This moratorium doesn't apply to you, Joan, correct?
No, it doesn't apply.
So
and I just want to, I dropped in the chat the CDC transmission map, and I just want to highlight a couple of facts. Obviously it creates a situation where if a county drops below the high transmission, the moratorium ends 14 days following that. So it creates a situation where we have different counties, again, it creates a lot of confusion for both the renters, the landlords, and the courts who are overseeing this whole process. And I mean, from a public policy standpoint, it also serves as a disincentive to get the vaccine because, I mean, I just want to highlight that catch-22. When you have high transmission rates, how do you resolve that? By getting the vaccine, which is something that, obviously we're all, many are advocating for, but then as we look at reducing that transmission rate, it just seems like a policy catch-22. And again, it just creates a lot of confusion.
So sorry, I want to make sure I'm understanding this one. So you have to have a surge in cases for 14 days, right? And if you see a decline in cases, let's say, between now and 2 weeks ago, that means the moratorium is then doesn't then apply?
Yeah, the moratorium would end in that county if that county's transmission rate drops below below high, which all 15 counties in Arizona is considered high.
And if it goes up again, the next, let's say it drops today, so 14 days, today is like declining. Today, moratorium doesn't apply, and then tomorrow and the next 2 weeks, it goes up again. What happens?
You're stumbling up upon the catch-22 that and the confusion that exists. Ultimately, the moratorium, whether you're high, substantial, what have you, the moratorium at this moment would end October 3rd. And I think that that's what most folks are, most administrators, judicial administrators are kind of have that lens of. But again, the way the CDC eviction moratorium was extended is that it does have that catch, that clause.
Representative Toma, do you think, sir, that come October 2nd, this moratorium will be extended again?
Well, it's an interesting question because, as you probably know, the Supreme Court has already ruled that the previous moratorium was unconstitutional, and I happen to agree. But that aside, they could actually be ruling on it maybe even this week, that on this version that it could be also unconstitutional, which further causes further confusion and uncertainty and compounds the problem even further. If you're asking a political question, I guess I can give you my opinion. I think they're going to try to extend it, yes, but in terms of whether or not it's the right thing to do, I would strongly say absolutely not, for all the reasons that we talked about. And first and foremost, for me personally, it's because it actually hurts more. This situation has caused more damage than it's helped to solve. And actually, going back to what Director Simplot had said, absolutely important that landlords and tenants talk to each other during this time. The biggest frustration from a landlord standpoint isn't that the tenant is going through difficulty, because often people are willing to work with you. It's when they don't know what's happening and when you're ghosting your landlord for 12 or 18 months, or however long this has been now, that's what's usually causing the frustration. The landlord's just throwing up their arms and going, you know what, the moment I get rid of you, the better, and then I can sell this house and get rid of this and don't have to deal with this any longer. And then that happens more and more and more, and that causes more issues because now there's less properties available to rent, and it compounds the problem. So for all those reasons, I don't I would be surprised if we last until October 3rd at this point with this particular version, but who knows? They'll come up with a different version that might compound the problem even more.
Jared, once the moratorium ends, what do you see nationwide? What do you see happening?
Yeah, thanks, Luigi. Our economic research team did some best guess estimates, if you will, around the end of June, the last time the moratorium was scheduled to end. So I want to preface that the numbers I'm about to share are slightly old at this point. Our team is working on the new ones, trying to work through as these deadlines keep extending and the game, frankly, keeps changing. But as of June 30th, some of the numbers that our in-house economic research team was estimating for evictions were really around almost 7 million households could be at the threat of eviction nationwide, which actually, when you drill down deeper, about half of those were really at actual risk of eviction, so close to 3 million. When you talk specifically about the state of Arizona, our figures estimate that there's approximately 138,000, households that are currently kind of on the cusp, with about half of them, 63,000 households, being actually at the risk of eviction. It's anyone's best guess once that moratorium is actually lifted or things end as to what that looks like from a actual numbers basis. But that's our estimate right now. If it were to drop, with these figures, we would estimate close to almost 4,000 households being evicted on a monthly basis in the state of Arizona.
Sorry, did you say 4,000 households potentially evicted on a monthly basis?
On a monthly basis. And this, again, is slightly outdated data from June 30th deadline and examining the figures then. So perhaps that number has come down, but that is our estimate based off of the data and the situation as of June 30th when the previous moratorium was extended.
So, all right, if you're a family right now and you haven't really been up to date with your rent. So you face an eviction and you know that potentially you have an adversarial relationship with your landlord. So you know that, the moment the moratorium ends, they're going to move on you and try to get you evicted. Director Simplot, what do you do?
Call your landlord. And quite frankly, when you talk about evictions, not all evictions are the same, right? Not all evictions were halted during this moratorium. If the tenant violated their lease for other reasons, they could still be evicted, and they were. And I think it was Jared who talked about that. So that's important to keep in mind. If you have been following the terms of your lease, but for you have not been able to make your payments, call your landlord right away. Initiate that conversation.
Joan, sorry, go ahead, sir. Ma'am, go ahead, Joan.
Oh, I dropped in the chat some toolkits that we've developed to, again, strengthen that relationship because it is a very symbiotic relationship between the landlord and renters. You talked about, is this a pessimistic conversation? Ultimately, we want to make sure that landlords and renters are working together and strengthening that communication. I'm pleased that as emergency rental assistance has rolled out, it's shifted from going right to the landlord or right to the tenant, and now both parties can apply. Yes, there's some requirements and reporting that we've already talked about, but we want to strengthen that conversation because if frankly, evictions are lose-lose. Everyone's saying stably and safely housed. That's a win-win.
Right, and I do want to notice just real quickly, and then I'll go to Representative Toma. I do want to note that if you have been evicted, that record stays with you for a number of years. And the way the rental housing industry works, they do vet the folks that are coming into their units. And if you have an eviction on you, it gets it really difficult for you to then apply and get a rental unit. But Majority Leader, go ahead, sir.
Well, to your most recent point, again, agreed. That's another reason that you need to talk to your landlord, because there's all this rental assistance, and if you're both on the same page, then it's going to be that much easier to sort of help each other get through the process, get the assistance, and avoid the eviction to begin with. But I just wanted to give a little bit of context to what Jerry had said in terms of the 4,000 per month. That is about normal for Arizona pre-pandemic in terms of the number of evictions. So just to give a little bit of reference, it's not a comment either way, just so everybody gets some idea of what that what that looks like. In other words, I think what Jared is saying is that they're essentially projecting that we'll go back to normal post the moratorium.
And that is an excellent point, Representative. And I should add that our economists have, over the course of now what has been over a year, right, really adjusted these projections to reflect what looks more like a soft landing, so to speak, than a really stiff cliff, if you will, a steep cliff. So definitely, to Representative's point there, much more of a adjusted figure than I think folks originally anticipated.
At this point, I want to go to some of our audience questions. There's a lot of them, and again, I want to thank our viewers and our listeners for for joining us this morning. Here's one from April: is the state or are our local governments prepared for the end of the moratorium? Director Simplot or Joan, you want to answer this one?
Are they prepared? I think they have learned a lot. I think every level of government has learned a lot out of this process. I will also say, based upon the biweekly meetings from stakeholders, the cities, counties, the state, the courts, the landlord attorneys, the tenant advocates, people have actually been saying consistently, it's getting better. People are learning how to use the system better. Is it working great? No, but we've come a long way from the very beginning. So again, going back to is there some hope here? I think there is some hope here. Joan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I want to share that according to the Census Household Pulse Survey research from University of Arizona, there is, Arizona renters not current on their rent is 9.3%, which is down from 11.6. And so this again is welcome news. It's probably a result of an improving economy, rental assistance going out the door, and the child tax credit payments. Do I think that we're prepared? Yes and no, right? Like I think ultimately what COVID has really shown shown that we don't have, we have gaps in our eviction data. As Jared mentioned, it's best guess. Ultimately, we struggle with the eviction data, because what happens is landlords might be filing that eviction. And then what happens is that then landlords and tenants talk and they come out with a rental agreement. And that eviction never gets filed. So what the true number is, it is anyone's best guess. We do think that there's going to be, it's going to be disproportionate to our Black and brown renters. And obviously that's due to both housing and employment discrimination structures that have existed for numerous years. But ultimately, I do think, we as a help system can be responsive. It's just going to take time. Keep saying that.
Majority Leader, I think this is a question for you. It's from Andres Cano, and the question is, what about the role of the Housing Trust Fund? At its peak, it was 40 million. Last year, it was 15 million, and this year, it's 0. Your thoughts, sir?
Well, it's an interesting question, especially given our current budget projections. Yet again, it looks like we're going to have quite a bit of resources at the state level. And as always, I remain open to any ideas that make sense. I think the one sort of concept that I do remain somewhat resistant to is this idea that we as government are going to fix the whole thing. Ultimately, whenever we do something, as I've said before, there are unintended consequences, and part of that is because our system is so complex and it's so tied in different areas. And so we have to be very careful that we don't rush to a solution that is, as I've said before, half-baked and doesn't actually solve the problem or creates even bigger problems along the way. And so one of the things that, as I've said from the beginning, some of the local municipalities, kind of similar to what you guys are doing, Jared and Joan, you actually mentioned this as well, kind of a central application, that same idea, but maybe for developers, bring them in and sit down with every city inspector, reviewer, everything from the landscaping to the civil to structural, get everybody in the same room, figure it all out. And don't just, we're going to take 2 weeks for the landscaping review and then send it back in, and then another 2 weeks for this other thing, and then another 2 weeks for whatever. And then pretty soon you're 6 months into this and you haven't even thought about breaking ground, and then you have supply shortages, and then instead of building an apartment building that's badly needed in 6 months, you've now taken this out to 36 months by the time it's actually done. So as long as there is a will for local municipalities as well to partner with us and to figure out ways to truly get this ball rolling and to do it quickly, then I'm more than happy to make investments and to push making investments from the state as well. But without that, it's not really, it doesn't solve the problem, and it most definitely won't solve it in the short term, which is we need solutions now.
And on that note,
Luigi, can I just add one more thing? And
yes.
Representative Toma, you made a lot of really good points there. But I will say this, though, the Housing Trust Fund, which falls under the domain of the Arizona Department of Housing, actually, thanks to the our state legislature, actually does have an annual flow of funding, and that is through the Arizona Industrial Development Authority. So to say that there is zero in the Housing Trust Fund actually isn't accurate. There are funds in there. They have been coming into the Housing Trust Fund since 2017, and we are using those funds expeditiously. As a matter of fact, just 3 weeks ago, we issued what's called a Notice of Funding Availability. That was $21 million, which allows developers up to $2 million per project to close the gap on financing to get some of this these shovel-ready communities in the ground and moving along. So I just wanted to make sure folks were aware of that. The Housing Trust Fund is by far the most flexible pool of funding and resources that the state has created. Additional funding is always going to be greatly appreciated and used. But again, we are in a unique period of time because of the federal funding that has come into the state and the foresight of the Arizona legislature and the governor to actually have a source of revenue going into the Housing Trust Fund.
And I think we have room to just one more question. Really quickly, Jared, I want to ask you, we've talked about the need for Congress to streamline this process, to take a look at the law that they just passed, and to really eliminate the bureaucratic delays that we're seeing play out in our state and in other states. What are the chances of Congress actually taking this up, and how soon do you think it's going to happen?
Oh man, I'm not sure how I fielded that one, but looking into a crystal ball to see how Congress is going to behave is a sport I've never, frankly, been good at. But I do think it's as underscored by everyone else on the panel. It's an immediate need, right? And there's something that really is wrong here, and we're talking about millions, if not hundreds of thousands of people that potentially could not have a home. So finding a solution here and meeting the seriousness of this moment, I think is something that I hope that Congress and all stakeholders federally understand, because I think as many folks on this panel have already articulated, state and local levels are really being overwhelmed. So I personally hope, and I'm personally hopeful to continue with that theme, that there is going to be some action taken that can help this overall.
And with that, I think this is a good time to end. Jared, thank you again for your time. Joan, thank you so much. Majority Leader, thank you for your time, sir, for being so generous. And Director, thank you again for all the information this morning. I want to thank again our viewers and our listeners for joining us. We will be posting a record of this conversation on our website. And so you'll be able to access it if you want to watch it again, or for your friends and associates who missed today's morning scoop. And finally, I want to thank our sponsors, Zillow and the Arizona Housing Coalition, for their sponsorship and their engagement. It's one way. It's without their support, we wouldn't be able to talk about serious state issues such as the one that we're talking about today. And with that, thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day.